In hypnosis, I use this phrase, you want to be hypnotized, you expect to be hypnotized, you will be hypnotized. And I think it applies to out-of-body journeys as well. If you use the techniques, if you learn how to quiet your mind, if you follow simple techniques, they relate to different brain frequencies. So some of them are called, like a rope technique. When you utilize your senses and create for the brain the same experience as if you were actually taking those physical steps. So for example,
today, I'd like to welcome Aga to the show. Aga, it's such an honor to finally have you here. I know it took a while for us to finally meet, but I'm so happy that we did. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I definitely share and radiate this joy that we could finally connect. Let me begin by saying a little bit about my background. I was born in Krakow, Poland, and ever since I was a little girl, I had quite unusual experiences in life, not a typical upbringing and not a typical connection with reality, if you will. So those experiences that we're going to talk about today led me to, explore inner domains eventually very thoroughly as I have gotten older. And as a result of these experiences and thousands of hours of meditation and refining my perception, my skills, and obviously that continues to happen every day, I have become a skilled therapist, a hypnotherapist, hypnosis teacher, and I'm in the process of obtaining a degree in psychology or mental health counseling. I'm not sure which direction I'm going to go yet, but I realized or decided that combining the spiritual, the holistic, the somatic, trance-based therapy with techniques that are used in traditional Western therapy, and having a license so that people can actually use insurance to pay for my services is a good way to actually bridge different concepts, right? And have profound results that don't need to take years to accomplish. I'm excited to share this information and learn more about you as well. I know we have some common ground here that we talked about briefly before we went online.
Yeah, a lot of common ground. Actually, I just want to be clear to the audience that I do not know Aga's story, and I'm so excited to hear about her experiences and what led her to be who she is today and to be on the path that she is on right now. And I just want to say thank you for having the desire to combine the two, because I think it's so important that people have access to modalities that they may not have access to just because they're part of a system that they can't afford it, or that makes it difficult for them. So I noticed just feeling like a lot of warmth around my heart that that's the path that you're going, because if I could, coach everyone for free, I would. If I could be covered by insurance, I would, and we all are in this system. So we have to do what we have to do. But to be able to make things accessible, that's why I do this podcast, so that people can tune in for free and listen to things that might really, really touch their heart and that they can relate to. So I'm going to be done talking for a little bit. I'm really excited to learn about you. And so with that being said, let's just get started with, you mentioned a few things about, not typical experiences. I'm curious if you would share a little bit about your background and your journey that brought you to being a hypnotherapist and where you're at today.
Perfect. Thank you. I realized as a little girl that I'm living in an environment that seems quite obtrusive or cruel to me. Both of my parents had different types of psychological issues, and pretty early on, I realized that it's very challenging for me to feel safe. The only time I would feel safe was when I was visiting my grandmother. My grandmother lived in a village. I grew up in Krakow, which is like medium-sized European city. It's a beautiful city full of art and, castles. And I love, being able to connect with art. This is something that I do on a regular basis. However, my upbringing, the reason why I said it was challenging and abnormal was because I felt like I am suspended in between realms. Like I couldn't quite anchor my consciousness into my body. To give you an example, I would frequently faint or lose consciousness. Before I was free, I was falling down the stairs. I was unable to sort of like understand what gravity is about and that this is my body. I'm supposed to be in the body. I didn't get that. And I had an experience on a swing. My mom took me to a park. She didn't put this chain like around my waist. And I had one of those out of body experiences simultaneously. So a lot of them happened simultaneously. It happened unconsciously. What I wanted to say is that I wasn't able to control it at that time. And I didn't know what would trigger that or when it would happen. So I'm swinging. I love to swing, and I catapulted out of the swing and hit the ground. My mom thought I died because, I just basically landed far out of the swing, and I was a little girl. I have, by the way, these memories intact. I remember the pounding headache. I remember being taken to hospital. My mom was a nurse. And the anxiety that I felt, I couldn't relax around my parents because my mom was very verbally unstable and also physically. And I was yelled at a lot and just abused. My father also did some things that led me dissociate further from what it's like to feel normal, healthy, connected to this physical domain. So with this sort of pretext, let's go into those experiences that I mentioned to you, which are more of a spiritual nature. Going out of body, escaping the body, escaping this reality. Okay, first it started as a coping mechanism to deal with trauma. But then later, I realized that I was sort of living in that dream-like space more or less permanently, meaning that that was my normal state. Being in the body was rare. And I didn't realize that being a child. So for example, if I go back to those memories at my grandma's house, I'm sitting in front of her house. It's a beautiful day, sunshine. My grandma is cooking lunch, and I'm outside just looking at the sky. I'm sitting on stairs. And typically, I would cope with my stress with reading. So one thing I would do, I would just have books always. I was around me. I would always read to kind of, carve my own sub-reality, if you will, safe space. But at grandma's place, I felt okay. She hit me only once when I was very little because she was trying to protect me. I grabbed like a tool that could be dangerous for me. And she was a simple woman, Other than that, she was sweet and loving. So I felt safe there. And I'm looking at the sky, and all of a sudden I see a figure of Christ. It's made of clouds and light. And I see this, just like I am describing to you. I see it over and over again, and I can recall the feeling. And this light is beaming towards me and is enveloping me with the level of love that I have never experienced on earth at that time. This was something that I had no context for. I grew up in Catholic country, and I was praying absolutely because, I was very afraid. And oftentimes I couldn't fall asleep. I was crying and I was praying. So I was familiar with the concept of God, and I was familiar with those pictures, of like Christ with a light coming from the heart. And that's what I was seeing. It's not like I was trying to see it. I wasn't looking for it. I was just sitting outside enjoying the moment. And that the contact, the transmission, the visitation, the experience would last several minutes. It wasn't quick. I wasn't, in danger. It was not like a typical near-death experience where something happens and you are connecting to deeper or more subtle levels of reality. It happened in broad daylight with me just being very relaxed outside. And so I was just receiving that support and that unconditional love, and felt absolutely elated. It happened several times over the years. So it wasn't a one-time occurrence. I was obsessed, you can imagine looking at the sky and just like, looking for more, hoping for more. And I would tell my friends at the village, one time my grandma is calling me for lunch, but I'm like in that state and I'm experiencing this, and it's 20, 30 minutes. And I'm like, grandma, I'm talking to Jesus, come and see. She came out, and of course she didn't have the same experience as I've had, but for me, it happened for a few years in a row. And I also had some other abilities. For example, if somebody was going to pass, I would get an information, okay, that person is going to die. And those kids in the village would call me a witch. It's not like I was doing it on purpose, but it would just pass through me. I didn't know how to navigate that tool, that technology that I have. I just had very odd experiences. And in terms of, my regular life at school, I would be really good when it comes to academics, helpful, a bit competitive, trying to understand this life around me. But I realized that, other kids are treated differently than I am. Their parents don't kick them, they don't yell, they don't call them names. And I started just going deeper and deeper inside. I realized that I couldn't really be myself and even share words and write. I tried to write a journal. My mom found it, was very upset about that. Never able to really understand that she's hurting me. So I grew up in a family that really didn't know how to love me, except for my grandmother. And it's interesting how that works, right? Because that grandma is a mother of my mother, and my mother was very traumatized by her. We're talking about World War II generation. But you know how like postmenopausal women's brain changes and you become this like mellow yellow version of yourself, and you completely, just cut out all these pieces of the movie that are not fitting into that picture perfect vision that you have of yourself. So, I wasn't aware of that. Later on, I realized fully, what my grandparents went through and how trauma is passed through generation, and how I ultimately broke that chain and broke that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
In psychology, the characters like me are called scapegoats or black sheep. Yeah. So this is exactly what I am to this day.
Yeah, you're
But
speaking my story, and I have some questions actually right now that I'm really curious about, because I feel like I could just take your story and say it out of my mouth and it would be applicable. But I'm curious because I grew up in a Catholic environment. I was raised Catholic. I went to catechism, and I remember hearing a voice, and I told my mom, the almost like you had the experience with your grandma where you were like, I'm talking to Jesus. I told her, I said, I hear God. I hear God talking to me. And I was so excited. I was maybe like 3, 4, 5. I was very, very young. And she told me that not to listen because it was the devil trying to tempt me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned you were you were raised Catholic, and I'm curious with the information you would get when people would pass and some of these abilities that you had, were you able to embrace them, or were you scared of them?
Very good question. Let me tell you, I have this kind of sarcastic aspect of me. And at the same time, I have a very curious mind. So even in childhood, because I was very well read, ever since I started reading when I was 5 or 6, I would compulsively read. And I realized that, the intel I'm getting through these transmissions and connections, doesn't really match with what I'm hearing outside. So I've been skeptical since my childhood in terms of what other people around me are trying to tell me, program me with, or indoctrinate me with. I didn't have those words, of course, at the time, but I would ask them questions and they would dismiss me. So I wasn't scared. I was scared most of the time anyway. So that was really sort of my baseline. But I also have this power, I have this dragon energy that is like unsatiated. And even if it's scary, I'm not going to back away from the quest. Yeah. So that, I have that fire. I have that combination of air energy and fire energy. Very ethereal, but also fire can really help you if you need to charge. So obviously I learned later how to harness that and use it consciously, right? But at that time, I was very curious. I was asking questions. And I was dismissed. Most of the time, I was dismissed. My mom did use words like, you made a pact with the devil. I'm quoting her directly. So this correlates to what you experience 100%. The same lens through which they look at life, and it's very fixed and very rigid. So because, I had experiences that really contradicted anything that they were saying, and I was quite involved in that otherworldly life, there was not enough words that my family could say to convince me that, that I should stop this questioning. I should stop the inquiry. Uh-huh.
I love that you trusted what you felt. And, I had experiences where I was really, really afraid. And even in that fear, I would turn to Jesus, even though I was asking questions too. I mean, literally, I feel like you and I are the same person. I would ask questions too, and I would get either dismissed or told things like you were told. And yet, when I was really, really afraid, I would grab my rosary and just turn to Jesus and say, I love Jesus, I love Jesus. And I would be soothed. And
Yes.
I did not understand what was happening. I actually had an experience like you, but I turned to addiction at a very, very young age. I turned to an eating disorder. And so I kind of just popped out of both worlds and into my own as my coping mechanism. But yes, even with the fear or the words, it was like, there was something I knew about Jesus or something that I was connected to. So yeah, I just find that fascinating. So please continue.
And if I may add to what you're saying, it's not just a belief. I would suggest that you had a knowing because you had a direct experience, which is very different than the belief, right? Like, for example, I don't believe something unless it is an experiential reality. To me, I need to understand that this is an internal event I'm having, and the internal reality obviously is pretty much most of what reality is comprised of. So that is the primal reality, right? And these are all kinds of aspects of mosaics of life that we can engage in and we can pursue once we understand that this is the fundamental reality, which is consciousness. But yeah, we often use these words, believe, maybe interchangeably with knowing, although there is a little bit of a different weight to them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
agree. Yeah. To me, a belief is like a thought, right? I can believe something, but a knowing, I don't have to believe what I know. I know it.
totally. It's
Yeah,
visceral.
it
It's
is. Yeah.
concrete. Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I definitely, yeah, 100% we're from the same universe.
I know.
And it's so glad to, it's so joyful to recognize that, because sometimes I'm sure you feel the same way, that we're like unicorns on this planet, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, especially when I was a kid, now more so, especially with this podcast, I can recognize that I'm not the only one, but I know that my inner child is, connecting to your story and really celebrating like, oh my gosh, I wasn't the only one.
Hmm. And then you came on the other side,
Hmm.
much evolved, way ahead of most people on this planet. Unfortunately, we're not involving, in unison. It's a very individual experience. But trauma is directly connected, especially sexual trauma, or prolonged trauma, with spiritual advancement, if we actually take the time, to do the inner work. This is just trauma is an initiation, and then you obviously have to, as an initiate, step into that path. So when I realized that later in life, that this is my calling, it also happened kind of through mm, through the back door, if you will. I worked in academia. I went to school, not for psychology, even though I wanted to study it, but because I was so depressed, I had severe insomnia. I was so disconnected in terms of like my own personal power as a teenager, that I was influenced by my mother in terms of the choice of my high school. And, it's just complete lack of support, right? So I ended up studying business and economy. And once I graduated, I moved to the United States. And my consciousness went into art. I started photographing, creating photographic collages, and I have a really interesting portfolio of like dark, surreal erotica. I would take people to abandoned buildings. It's interesting how now it makes sense why I would go there. My subconscious would take me there, because I didn't have a lot of these memories, with my father touching me. I remembered a couple of things, but because I was always yelled at, and my sister, which is 5 years younger than me, was obviously taught to act literally as an extension of my mother. Everything that I felt and wanted to communicate was automatically criticized. All my questioning, right, was attacked. So my subconscious was talking to me in a variety of ways, and I was creating these photographic art and exhibiting. I was in US. I moved right after I graduated college in Poland. When I was 23, I moved to United States. And gradually I realized, okay, outside of being this ferocious, animal and just was hungry for knowledge, I also have pretty good idea about visual beauty and certain aesthetics. I started pursuing art. And I ended up in a relationship at some point with an artistic creator as well, filmmaker and a DJ. And our relationship was really wonderful for like 2.5, 3 years. And last year became quite rocky. And I was again, the, don't get me wrong, like I had my own coping mechanisms. I was drinking at that time, just like you had your addiction. I could never drink like a lot, but I was drinking in my 20s. And this was something normal. And even though my system couldn't handle a lot of alcohol, I definitely was like a functional alcoholic. But I was also, very, just very loving, kind person in with that obviously dark side. I was this dark angel. So my relationship with Ryan started to crumble, and I was very attached to him at that time. And he said things that were a bit confusing, like I'm hurting him, but he is willing to give it some time. And I decided to try Vipassana meditation, 10-day silent retreat, in order to go inside and figure out, how am I hurting this person that I love so much? So, I took this as an opportunity to go deeper. And I had a couple of friends who have done Vipassana retreats. I like to do challenging things. And I signed up. And I had one of those profound experiences that absolutely changed my life. I couldn't sleep at this retreat. Past 2 days, my whole body is hurting. I'm meditating 8-10 hours a day in the same position with short breaks. You feel muscles and bones that you never knew existed in your body. And I also started feeling my energy just kind of building up, all the sitting, all the meditation, focusing on the breath and focusing on the Vipassana technique and scanning the body. And I could tell that something is going to happen, like I'm going to pop, because it's just pent up energy that's becoming very thick, and at some point it's going to do something with me. It almost felt like, if you're looking at a cage with a bird, that this cage is going to open and I'm going to go somewhere. And that's exactly what happened on day 7. I go into the meditation hall and immediately I eject out of the body and I go into space. So I am, partially in this meditating position. The energy is spinning. I'm spinning like in a whirlpool, in a vortex. And I have this voyage, this quest, looking at stars, planetary systems, sun and whatnot, with full color. And it is accompanied by extreme level of ecstasy, just the kind of level of ecstasy that I was experiencing when I was communicating with Jesus, or Jesus was communicating with me. So I am in this full-blown, ecstasy, and I'm like, so this is what meditation is about, I didn't know that much about what is possible, right? I didn't know about trauma. All this terminology was new to me. I wasn't like some of the other seasoned meditators who studied Sanskrit, who were well-versed in certain psychological language. I wasn't. But yet I had this experience. And I remember my teacher asked me, at the end, like, how was my experience? Like, after we could talk, because you don't talk for 10 days during the retreat. And I shared, I went somewhere and I had this journey that was just absolutely ecstatic. And I felt like something just plugged me into life, literally. Remember how I told you that I was like in between and I was more there than here? Okay, I was plugged into this reality now, and the vibrancy of colors and, intensity, like pleasant intensity, joyful, ecstatic, all of that was part of it. And so the teacher told me that, I have a very strong mind, that I should, make sure that I stay grounded. None of the other participants had the experiences that I have had. Since that Vipassana retreat, I've had multiple, more than I can count, of those kinds of experiences. And so we can talk about that too, but this is not something that is rare to me. I can go out of body. I can check on people. I receive information. I also have my own challenges. Physically, my nervous system is very sensitive. So I have to make sure that I eat diet that is full of amino acids, stay away from sugar, stay away from carbohydrates, because that will create environment in my body that will rattle, my gentle balance. Because, trauma did certain things to me. COVID did some things to me. Neurotoxicity that I experienced. So my journey is not always in this elated state. I needed to learn how to ground and how to utilize this life force energy in a way to like overcompensate for things that are challenging for me, hard for me. And also just know that there is this aspect of the universe that I can talk to, that is channeling for me, And I utilize it, with sessions, and to also guide my decisions in life and so on.
Yeah.
So it's a, constant communication and exercise, if you will, on many levels that I partake in.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. And I love how, well, before we pressed record, we talked a little bit about, certain supplements that, we can take. You mentioned amino acids, and I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this. So, but I'm just going to ask the questions anyways, because I noticed feeling really curious. So the past week-ish or so, couple of weeks, and I'm ultra sensitive to sounds, to foods, to everything, any kind of stimulus I'm extremely sensitive to. But a topic that has been really at the forefront for me has been where I've been teaching my clients that toxicity is not just behavioral or mental. Like, toxicity is whole, and it's what we consume, it's what we listen to, it's what we watch, it's how we act and who we have in our lives. And so since the solar eclipse, I've noticed feeling that sensitivity is magnetized, like in a really, really big way. So you had mentioned certain things about carbs. I'm curious if you could just kind of zone in on, being sensitive and how we can take care of our bodies that are actually in this world.
Wonderful question, very practical question, and I'm going to give the audience an answer that is based on my experiences. I used to be plant-based, 14 years of being pretty much vegan-centric with very little exception. And I was mostly feeling great, although, after this spiritual awakening and Kundalini awakening that followed, I lived in bliss and ecstasy for quite a few years. I still had insomnia. Maybe I didn't mention that. I started having issues with sleep since I was 16 onwards. So, I'm 46 right now. That means like 30 years, right? Off and on. And some years were really challenging and difficult. So with all that spiritual work and doing, thousands of sessions, you would think that, all my symptoms will go away. That wasn't true, right? And after I had COVID and I realized that I also have a neurotoxicity in my brain, which took a bit to uncover, it became very clear to me that, that spiritual energy is and mental energy and how we talk to ourselves and our patterns is not everything that navigates this body-mind connection. Okay, there is a growing body of evidence, in fact, that shows, and I can mention some names like Dr. Palmer, Brain Energy. I would highly recommend everyone who is working on themselves spiritually, has trauma, but is not able to clear the symptoms, even with deep work and coaching and hypnosis and whatnot. There is this physiological aspect, there is, chemistry, there's biochemistry. We produce certain neurotransmitters in our gut, like oxytocin, dopamine, melatonin, serotonin, and whatnot. And these are produced in the gut. So the best way to ensure that you have optimum levels of these neurotransmitters that are responsible for your mood, right, is to consume diet full of amino acids. So I take amino acids, and there are a few that I would recommend to everyone. 5-HTP is a really good compound. 5-HTP is made of tryptophan. So tryptophan is going to have very calming, nice, relaxing effect. It's not going to knock you out. I take this in the afternoon, or I take it if I feel anxious. Sometimes maybe I have a job interview or something that I need to manage. For example, GABA is another one that I use daily in the evening. There are other amino acids. There is a group of them called DLPA, and I can share this information in detail with you for people to actually look those up. And there are another, we have several of these amino acids. So they're not just used for synthesis of collagen and building strong muscles, okay? Your neurotransmitters are built of amino acids. So what I did in order to heal, because I was doing multiple days of fasting, 9 days, 7 days, I had lots of symptoms after COVID. And I know a lot of people are still struggling with that, even though we're not talking about it as much. But the challenges are real for a lot of people after COVID or after getting vaccinated. People don't feel the same anymore. I know I've had several clients, I'm sure you have had too, right? So we really have to take radical action and understand that what we think is good for us, certain foods are absolutely toxic, especially in US, so
Yes.
no additives, no seed oils. I don't consume any grains. I don't recommend those unless you're eating ancient grains and you are, I don't know, in Guatemala in a small village. I would stay away from that. A little bit of nuts, avocado, but now I shifted from being plant-based to eating mostly meat, avocado, eggs, butter. I can handle a little dairy, little greens here and there, very little fruit. And my symptoms went away. So even if I'm going through a challenging time, as long as I eat this way, I don't feel rattled. I will have, of course, different moods, just like a regular normal human being, but I will not have symptoms of bipolar or schizophrenia or other like very impactful conditions that unfortunately people with childhood trauma experience on a regular basis. It's a background of our life. Okay, let's be real here. So whatever we can do to make sure that we build strong nervous system, this is fundamental, not amount of, in my experience of meditation, which I've done 70,000 hours of, okay, and counting, and breath work will heal certain parts that are physiological, and we ought to support that part with the food that we eat. So I'm no longer a proponent on plant-based diet, especially for people who have a history of trauma. They do much better on carnivore or ketogenic, low carb, that kind of, diet. It's been proven by science now to stabilize the nervous system, rebuild neuroplasticity, and really create like a healthy brain so that we can navigate our life, And it's very interesting if you do that, or if anybody who's listening will do that, your thinking will change. You're going to start seeing things that you were completely unable to perceive prior. Because when your brain feels good, you relax, the level of calm is so profound that all of a sudden meditation is easy. You don't have to struggle. So yeah, I now, like with every client, I talk about diet, and I also ask them about heavy metals. Heavy metals exposure is pretty common now, even if you don't have root canals, but especially if you have root canals or you have metal feelings in the mouth. Some of us were were treated with those metals. These absolutely need to be removed, replaced. And not only that, in order to remove heavy metals on a cellular level, fasting or taking spirulina or eating cilantro will not remove heavy metals from the body, okay? You need something what's called chelation. So chelation is a process of injecting a compound like EDTA and intravenously introducing a substance that will magnetize heavy metals, and then you pee them out. So you think you have major trauma, you've been healing for your life, you're still not healed. Whoever is listening here, you need to take those actions as well. Otherwise, no amount of therapy will really compensate for lack of that, clean, internal, strong physical environment.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much for taking us through that. I love how how your mind is and how you think, because to me and in my experience, it's healing is holistic and it really requires all the things, right? Like mind, body, and soul. And so for me right now, I'm training for a marathon. And so body is really, really, really important for me. And you know, with that, I want to jump back a little bit because I know we've been talking for a while. So I want to make sure we talk a little bit more about certain experiences. Like I'm curious about the out of body experiences. So you had the one when you were doing, you had your first real major, this is one, when you were doing your 10-day Vipassana sit. And, you know, when I think about it, like my curiosity is, can everyone, like, is it possible for anyone or everyone to have out of body experiences? Is this something we can learn or teach ourselves? Or is it something that, you know, we have to have a level of healing or cleansing or clarity to be able to achieve? I don't know if that makes sense.
That's a great question. You know, there are many factors to it. Of course, if somebody's curious and persistent, they're going to find a way. So I think that, you know, in hypnosis, I use this phrase, you want to be hypnotized, you expect to be hypnotized, you will be hypnotized. And I think it applies to out-of-body journeys as well. If you use the techniques, if you learn how to quiet your mind, if you follow simple techniques, you know, they relate to different brain frequencies. So, you know, in order to get out of body, typically you would set up your alarm for around 3 or 4 a.m. when you're like in the state in between and do some techniques. Some of them are called, you know, like a rope technique. When you utilize your senses and create for the brain the same experience as if the brain was, as if you were actually taking those physical steps. So for example, you are visualizing, you know, rolling out of bed, touching the carpet underneath your feet. Where do you want to go if you want to astral travel or go out of body? Maybe you want to visit your grandma. Maybe you want to go to library. You want to go to Bali, whatever the case may be. You need to sort of map out, okay, the sensory experience that you're going to have. It's a work, it's an exercise, it's a focus, right? So when we practice that and we're in sort of that state, you know, where we're sleepy, but we are awake enough, lucid enough that we can navigate our brain and give instructions. A lot of people will have experiences with some practice of going out of body. So you know, you grab the knob of the door, and as if you were walking out the door, catching a plane to go somewhere, you take these steps internally. For some people, sounds can trigger that. Like if you're listening to certain music, there's plenty of those on the internet, and doing Vipassana or just scanning your body, being in a relaxed state, it can trigger you popping out of body. When clients come to me without prior experience, you know, your question was, can anybody, if if you are curious, if you are willing to take some steps and practice, it's pretty much guaranteed that you will. You don't have to be perfectly healthy or in any kind of like a, you know, measurement that is optimal. No, we need to learn. All of us would really benefit from engaging the mind and senses in order to create internal experience that we want to match. Because the brain has a capacity to create any environment internally, right? And your body as well. So this is a technology. And when you work enough with that technology, then it's just a natural consequence.
Yeah. I like how you described it as a technology. And I personally, through conversations, through my own experiences, I have a belief and a little bit of a knowing that, you know, we're all capable of having these experiences if we want to. We're all gifted in being able to access, right, like what's beyond this reality. And it's really, to me, it's more a state of openness. If we're open to it, like you said, if we really want to, we can achieve it.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is this part of like, okay, what does it take? Because listen, a lot of people, I don't think they even understand that they can modulate and create certain internal experiences based on their past. So for example, when I am guiding a client into hypnotic trance, I'm going to use their experiences, their memories, and I know how to bring those memories like in a high definition type of experience where it's much more intense, even more intense than what they originally felt. And it doesn't matter how far back we're going, right? We want to anchor a feeling of safety, or we want to anchor a feeling of, exuberance, exhilaration. There are words that you can use, there are language patterns that will bring people to this very experience as if it's happening now. And when you connect it to, the body, and then you anchor over gestures, it's like you're creating a shortcut now between the experience that you want, that memory, and that feeling that you're looking for. So when we close the gap, we create chain reaction, right? The feeling is stable. And the feeling is stable because we are employing all these different aspects. So learning that is something that not a lot of people have any idea about, frankly.
Right.
They are looking externally for solutions. Really, if somebody teaches you how to guide your inner technology, inner resources, you can create such powerful states. And often my clients, when they come out of session with me, which is 90 minutes, typically is not a very long process, unless we're doing past life regression. And they learn some anchoring. They learn how to recreate states that are extremely healing and powerful, and once you become well versed in that, you can really take that further, like you said, out of body journeys, many different directions. So you can initiate that. You just need to understand what you have available here, start utilizing it, and then you can really venture out to the universe, if that's your wish.
And what I'm seeing right now is the beauty of kind of like the context of how we started this conversation and before we pressed record, is that when we have trauma, that is our pathway. Because for me and my trauma, I went into addiction and I went through recovery. And through recovery, I learned a lot of the stuff that you just talked about. When I would have a panic attack, I learned, just really basic, simple, like, what are 5 things I can see right now? What are 5 things I can hear right now? What are 5 things I can feel right now? And along the process of healing, we actually gain a lot more control over our being and our minds. That really is the core of where we're at. So I know that we've been talking for quite some time, and I have a few questions that I ask all of my guests. But before we go there, I'd like to know if there's anything else that you want to add to the conversation, whether we've talked about it or not. Is there anything else that you want to contribute or be heard on right now?
I would just say that speaking about your past, even if it's difficult, is very empowering. Growing up in an environment that is not supportive doesn't mean that you should be listening to people who harmed you, consciously or not. We are deeply hiding because we've been taught to believe that what we have to say is invaluable. And how do we dare to step forth and have our own way of thinking, communicating, being, relating, and whatnot? I know I had that experience growing up and even in my 20s. And I use my voice right now in a very constructive way to help people come out of their own shadow and negative space, and really know that, you know, you have now access to information that is based on neuroscience, that is very validating, and also, you know, the techniques that you mentioned that help you cope and really shift, you know, from a place of panic and anxiety to a place of calm. You know, there's a variety of tools. So knowing that there is this support system, that you are not alone, that your life depends on your ability to step outside of that context that you grew up in, you know, is something that we all need on earth. The more people will do that and practice self-empowerment, the faster we will enter, you know, the level of reality that we all want, most of us want, which is balanced, which is self-empowered, which is sovereign. We have more understanding of our body capacity to heal our mind, and we are starting to make, therefore, more informed decisions rather than leaving that to experts that, as we know, are really failing, so-called experts with certain degrees in America. You know, medical mistakes are a third leading cause of death. You know, would you trust a specialist who would, comparatively on a test, score D minus? Because this is the equivalent. No, you wouldn't.
Right.
So, you know, the way I recommend people and what I do is like, I read, I study, I understand my context. I don't deny my context, because this gives me knowledge into how to best navigate a situation. Yeah. And so that level of authority and self-advocating, this is you know, what I really wanted to leave the audience with. Never stop exploring. There is information, and you are not the small being without a voice. So learn to use your voice with power and precision.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I do ask all my guests 3 questions. So the first question that I ask all my guests is, how would you define God or source?
I define it as consciousness, and consciousness is this ever-evolving idea that is based on acceptance and non-judgment. So it's this underlying field of energy where there is freedom for any experience. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. There is full acceptance. So I would define God as this all-encompassing field for which everything can take place experientially.
The next question that I ask all my guests is, what would you say is the purpose of life?
I don't know if life needs a purpose. Being alive is, you know, powerful enough. We define our own purpose, right? Like, I'm more interested in meaning. For example, if you look at Holocaust survivors, the ones who survived without relatively, you know, level of wounding that would be irreversible, are those people who practiced mindful little actions, just like you mentioned before, how noticing 5 things around you that are well, they would create a meaning in every little situation. So they would check what happens on that corner of the barrack, and they would just create that internal reality of meaning. And that would take them from this very horrific experience relatively safely to a place of, okay, I'm in control, I'm in authority of this moment of how I feel. So I would focus more on meaning, and you define that meaning. What that meaning is for you is just going to be very different and individual. So that's not yeah, there's no unified answer in that context for me.
I love that answer. Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
final question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to any younger version of yourself, what would that piece of wisdom be?
Sometimes I think about that question that you just asked. And I even was feeling that little aga yesterday. Um, and I would just say, sometimes it's like, hang on, girl, it's going to be over soon. Sometimes it's like, aren't we having so much fun?
Right.
So it varies, but I would say, you are not alone, and that movie will be over soon. We're here for a blink of an eye, and don't take this experience too seriously. Have as much fun as you can have with it, knowing that this is not who you are. Your experiences are not who you are. So yeah, remove that level of heaviness from your being, and enjoy the ride as much as you can.
I like it. And how do people find you if they want to get in touch with you or work with you?
My website is balanceisperfection.com. I invite all of you to check it out. I also have a YouTube channel, Balance Lab, where I post videos from sessions. There are some full hypnosis sessions available on my channel, lots of testimonies. Sometimes I also record videos on spiritual topics or mental health topics. You can find all those links on my website, balanceisperfection.com. That should be easy enough. And I look forward to, meeting some of you. Thank you for the conversation. It was so wonderful and supportive and, enlightening. Thank you for
Yes.
what you do.
Yes, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I will include all of those links in the description of this show as well. So if anyone's interested in finding her YouTube channel or contacting her, the links will be in the description of the show to make it nice and easy for you to find. So again, this has been such an amazing conversation. I've had so much fun when you were telling me the advice you'd give to your inner child or your younger version. I just felt the joy, and I have felt it through this entire hour. And I'm so honored that you reached out to me and that you joined me here today. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, Aga.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.